Everyone. So I'm excited to be up here with my panelists. I'll introduce myself first. Ooh. And then I will let them introduce themselves as well. So good evening. My name is Elise Blitzer. I am a senior sales consultant with TriNet. So we're sponsors of TiE Atlanta, very proud sponsors. You'll see usually myself or some of my colleagues around here at all of the events. And for those that don't know, we're an HR outsource company. So we partner with small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, and take payroll, benefits, compliance, all the stuff they don't want to deal with off their plate so they can focus on running their business and running the company. So I know in the past couple months here, we've been talking about product market fit. Now we're on to scaling your tech team and your talent. So I'm excited to be up here with my panel. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some questions and some Q&A.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Jordan. My company is called Knowledge Architects, and we're a training and development consultancy here in Atlanta, about 10 years old. We focus mostly in industrial maintenance and operations. So about 3 or 4 years ago, we started piloting what we call digital work instructions. So we're able to deliver AR and 3D work instructions for highly technical, industrial, and maintenance and operations procedures through a headset or a tablet. So we were doing that about 3 years ago, but fast forward, we decided it would be easier to leverage that technology into content as a service, so a CaaS platform. Most of our clients in transit and industrial maintenance use the same sort of equipment over and over, and so we are now piloting a series of content that we will use to leverage to sell to the industry. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Marty Pisciotti. I live in Alpharetta. I moved back to the Atlanta area about a year ago, and that was most recently from Seattle. In Seattle, I finished out 13 years with T-Mobile, and then joined Mod Pizza, which you may or may not have heard of. It's a smaller company as their head of HR. My career is a little unusual in that I started in the military and came out and have done sales and operations in retail and restaurants for a big part of my career, about 30 years. And then I decided to get some education in HR because I really respected the discipline and found that a great HR partner is an amazing resource for a lot of reasons. And so I thought, well, let me understand better what they do as I grow as a leader. And then I jumped into HR on the idea that, well, if you're used to running the front line and lots of employees, and HR is across the table, what happens if you go across the table and look at it from a different perspective? And I just absolutely fell in love with it. So I have sales and operations, and then over the last 5 or 6 years, HR at a very senior level. So I love it. I've run talent acquisition, org design, and leadership development, and then was responsible for the majority of employees through a team of about 300 generous and leaders at T-Mobile, and then at Mod, of course, around all of HR, which includes all those fun technical things like payroll, compensation, benefits, compliance, everything. So happy to be here, and thank you for the warm welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So let's start with a big picture question. We're talking about scaling your team today. So how do you know when it's time to scale your team? Should you stay lean with the employees you have? Should you scale it up quickly? What factors go into that? And how do you know when it's the right time for it? And that's for both of you.
I'll start with what I would tell. I've worked with a couple of startups since I left Mod because I really wanted the experience of working directly with founders that were starting out. I've worked with founders who were well established, but what do you do? How do you look at scale? I will tell you, and there's lots of ways to do org design. I think Sheila has a lot more experience than I do actually in org design, but I would tell you it's 2 words to keep in mind. It's very similar to what Matt said. Do you need the capability, and do you have the capacity? Those are the 2 key words to consider. What Matt said was, if there's a fire, go look and see, do you need to let it burn? Does it matter? If not, do I need to put it out? Well, what's the capability that it takes? And if I can do it, it doesn't start up again, I don't need any more capability than what I have. A corollary to that rule, and I'll just say, because I know I'm talking to a lot of founders and co-founders, you can't do it all yourself. Eventually, you have to let go, and I highly encourage you to do that because it's healthy. I don't know, Sheila, would you add anything?
Yeah, so that last part was important. Because, yeah, I have been building this company for the past 10 or 12 years. And you're right, I knew it inside and out, every part of that company. And so bringing on other people who really didn't have the same understanding of that business as I did was really difficult. But what I decided to do was every person, I built out my, my executive team first, and I built that out by hiring folks as consultants first, and then letting them stay on and prove themselves. We had to figure out, cadence, compatibility, competency, and the way we work. And all of those things were really important. And, after a certain period of time, 6 to 8 months, then I would make the decision to convert them over to full-time. And I literally did that with my leadership team first. So the 4 or 5 leaders that I have been through the fire with me, right? And I know now, 3 years in, they're all committed. And so on the other end of that, everyone underneath them, they have the responsibility of hiring. And so we still have that same sort of philosophy. We bring them in, it's trial by fire and a whole bunch of other things in a startup. But if you can stay and pass the test, you're in there for full time.
And you guys bring up good points. I know, Marty, you said you can't do it all. You have to pass some of it off. And Sheila, you talked about building out your executive team. So where do you find these people? Where do you find the right people to build your team with?
Yeah. Fortunately, again, my 20 years in consulting, you build a lot of relationships. So really, my leadership team came from people I knew in the industry. I had a great story. They knew me. We had worked together. And so it was easier for them to come on board and to, really latch on to the vision.
Anything to add to that?
So when you're small, meaning you're really starting out initially, it is all about networking. Someone asked me before we started, what's a technology solution? It was Zion. I think you asked me, what's the technology solution for hiring? There's LinkedIn, but LinkedIn isn't even new. That's old technology. And there really isn't a technology solution because it's about people. And people are so much more than a resume. A resume gets 7.5 seconds. On average, 7.5 seconds. Not a great way to hire someone more than 50 years old. LinkedIn's great, but it's really just a soft copy of your resume. And hopefully some activities that give people an opportunity to connect with you and understand, but LinkedIn is so muddled now. So networking, and what I have taught recruiters and been doing my whole career, is always be recruiting. It might be a great server you have at a restaurant, but they just have an attitude of service. It might be a customer. It might be someone you're talking to in terms of a vendor or in business, or of course, meetings like this that TiE does is incredible because it could be a friend of a friend, an acquaintance of an acquaintance, which is how I found my way here, was someone that Amin and I had in common. So it really is about people, especially when you're small. As you grow larger, and it's a different conversation, you start building an employer brand. So HR actually has a part of marketing in it that a lot of people don't realize. And so I ran employer brand at T-Mobile, everything from social media to actually advertising for people to come in and attracting people who you might not normally meet in your regular path. As you get bigger, you'll have to increase that gravity in your orbit.
And so we talked with Matt about the distributed workforce working remotely. What is both of your take on that? What are you seeing with your employees for fostering collaboration and culture? And I guess just to kind of start, Sheila specifically, is your company fully remote? Are most of your employees here?
So most of my employees, I have a base employee set of 10, and then I do outsource some of our technology, and we use South Africa and India right now for some of that outsourcing. But the base staff is here, all 10 of us, And again, because we have established protocols and relationships, we know how to work together. So we work in office 2 days a week and remote 3 days a week. And that, again, continues to, increase collaboration and our ability to work together. It builds trust, reliability, and then you really build a cadence and understand how people work, right? I think remote work is fine, but when you're really, really deep into technology, it doesn't matter what the business is. I think there is, a lot to be said about having face-to-face and interaction and relationship. And so I am a big relationship person. I build trust through relationships. And so I think it's important for us to have that ability to do that.
This is one we could spend the rest of the night on. So I'll just get a couple of highlights. I'll start generally, and then we'll talk about tech for just a second. So first of all, do you know why we do emojis and text? Does anyone know why? So when we were establishing spoken word as a human race, we relied on our facial expressions and our nonverbal gestures long before we could speak. That has never gone away, ever, ever, ever. Now, how many people have done virtual meetings and someone doesn't turn their camera on? Yeah. Like, I would not start a meeting until every camera was on. Then you find out who's doing what and where, right? But people, oh, no, I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to be on camera. That's not right. And we're like, okay, we'll accommodate that. We need to see your face. And when we can't, we put an emoji. I'm sick because I tell people, when I read your email and text, I think you're mad at me. You won $1 million. What? I owe taxes? What? Put a smiley face. I know you're happy for me, and I know I should be happy too. And I bet you do it a lot, don't even realize it, but you want people to know, no, interpret this happy or crying or whatever. Because the written word is fallible based on interpretation. So is a spoken word, and one way to reinforce your message is nonverbally. People need that. And nonverbals are best expressed in person. So we all work better in person. However, then you get into people's preferences. Some people find their energy being alone and being away from people. It's a highly mislabeled and misused word called an introvert. But what all introverts are people who get their energy back by being alone and being in solitude, which is great. Extroverts struggle with that because they get their energy from groups like this and being around people. So yes, people work differently in groups. Yes, people are different. But everyone works better being able to see who you are and understanding. You're saying something nice to me, but your nonverbals are telling me you don't like me or that you're closed off to my opinion. And if I can't see that, I'm struggling communicating and connecting with you. So virtual work is a challenge, and it was studied long before the pandemic in circles of leadership. We took an entire class on it, my master's degree, how to work virtually, long before we could ever imagine. Now, T-Mobile and Mod are based in Washington State. Washington State was one of the few states that really locked down during the pandemic. They literally overnight made it illegal to go to work in an office building. I mean, almost right away. So I was at T-Mobile at the beginning and then Mod throughout the whole pandemic. So we couldn't see each other. As a head of HR, I didn't meet my team. I actually had to run the whole team and connect with the company virtually, with the exception of the senior team. And we met seats apart in the boardroom with masks on. So it was incredibly difficult. And we all chose that commitment, and someone could step out if they wanted to or not show up. I share that with you because it is hard. It is hard. So you have to try harder to connect. Now let's talk about tech. Oh, by the way, one other thing, and I learned this from a Navy commander. In fact, of all things, on a panel similar to this one, he said there are wrench turners. So pandemic or not, you have people that have to go turn the wrench, and the wrench isn't virtual. So in Mod, for me, that was our cooks and our frontline people who had to deal with customers who were also dealing with the pandemic. We had to keep restaurants going. And at T-Mobile, we had 5,000 stores plus thousands more that were run by our dealers. So we had to go connect with those folks. We had B2B meetings that were hard to move virtually and installations of product, et cetera. Probably all dealing with that. So what happened was we had to find a way to lead through that and lead over it when we really wanted to get together and wanted to connect and absolutely couldn't. So those of you who have tech backgrounds probably know about Agile workplace, stand-ups, scrums, all that stuff, and just a way to get a sprint together so you know what's what do we need to accomplish in the next segment of time, week, 2 weeks, however long your sprint is. And the stand-ups are a way to keep going. Those are not only able to be done virtually, but the Agile Workplace is actually one that was designed to be completely virtual, which is why it didn't really catch on. Because companies who are completely agile, and the Bank of Scotland is an example of this, they don't live together at all. Even the senior team doesn't live together. They decide when they need to see each other in the same room, but otherwise they can be anywhere they want. And if you really commit to it and you can lead through it and everyone understands what the rules are, get your camera on, we need to see you. If we need to sit together, let's figure that out. But let's go ahead, and I love that Matt talked about principles and values. That is so important in any level of work. So when you're not there as the leader and founder, your people know what you expect. So I know that was a long run, but
that was
virtual is such a challenge, and I think given that pandemic, we figured out not only how to do that, but connect with customers as well.
Yeah, and I agree, because even, just as you said, for me, being able to look my leadership in the eye and for us to commit, because we have some really big, bodacious stuff to do, and you can't do that virtually, right? And so for, good luck for those of you who are trying to do that virtually. I was really clear that the people who were going to really lead us through this challenge and through the next 5 to 10 years, whatever that looks like, we need to like each other and we need to know how to work together in a room.
Absolutely. This goes right into, Marty, what you were saying about the difference between more of the technical expertise and then having those communication skills. So how do you balance that, looking for candidates that have the technical expertise you're looking for, but also more of the soft skills, the communication, fit in with your team culturally? What advice do you guys have for founders on that?
I'm a big fan of competencies. Matt touched on it. Know what you expect of the person before you even meet people to hire. You have to be clear on expectations for 2 reasons. It'll help you pick the right person in an imperfect hiring process, no matter what process you have. And 2, the first thing that person needs to know, other than who you are and what you're about, is what you expect of them. If you're going to successfully lead someone, the first thing you have to do is tell them what you expect of them. And then if they don't know how to do it or don't know how to do it well enough or your way, you teach them. Walk, crawl, run. That's it. That's how it works, because you can't hold them accountable. You have to earn the right to hold someone accountable. So if you hire someone and then fire them 3 weeks later, that's your fault, not theirs, right? Because you didn't understand what they could bring, you didn't check it. I love his 30, 60, 90-day plans, because I will tell you, every new hire will decide whether or not they're going to stay past the year in the first 90 days if they're with you. We found that to be true at T-Mobile. You have to care for them, not the day they're hired, every day after they're hired, and especially for the first 90. Check on them, over-communicate. And if communication is part of the role that they have, if they're in a leadership role or their team requires them to be great communicators, especially if English is a second language and English is your company's primary language, be sure you take the time to invite people in, get them comfortable, let them speak their voice in the way that they do, and give them a forum to do it. And if they're struggling, you got to help them. And if it's a job where they need to communicate, and that's important, then you can have them demonstrate that on the way in.
Yeah, I call it competency, clarity, and communication. Those are the 3 things I look for immediately.
That's great. The next one, I have a stat for everyone that was kind of surprising to me. We'll see if it is for you guys. 36% of candidates that got a new job in the past 6 months were actively recruited by the company versus employees now looking for companies to work for. So we've seen a bit of a shift in the market, more of an employee market. So how do you guys balance recruiting and finding the right candidates with running a business? You wear a million hats. Where does that come into play, and how do you have time for that piece of it?
So, yeah, that's a hard one. So for us, it was really important to focus on those 3 things, right? How do I get the right people in with these 3 things, and we're working together and we're singing, as my mother used to say, on the same hymnal, right? And so I wanted to be really laser focused on that. So in order to do that, I had to get rid of all the other stuff, the ancillary stuff that was on my plate. And so that's where organizations like TriNet come in, right? For me, TriNet was that place where I could offload HR, payroll, compensation, and all of the stuff that typically in an organization bogs you down. And so I get to focus on the stuff that's really important because, again, we've got some really heavy duty stuff that we've got to accomplish over the next 5 to 10 years. And by the way, the other way I incentivize and hire the right people once they've gotten through that is I incentivize by offering, they get to share in the spoils. At the end of the day, when I sell this company, every employee that works for me will get a part of that sale, right? They become part of that. And so there is a different level of commitment and ownership because they are part of something bigger. And it's not just a paycheck. So you've got to have these undergirding philosophies, for me, that not only incentivize, but help you focus on the right things. So for us, that's how we do it.
I would only add two things. I thought that was brilliant, and I think it also underscored what Matt said in terms of you don't have to hire everyone. You shouldn't be hiring everyone. Delegate that to the leaders, the sub-leaders within each of your departments and specialties. As you open up the specialties, you have a leader that can be responsible for that because they'll have a better idea of the technical skills required. I'll add two things. When I was partnering with, when I was responsible for recruiting at T-Mobile, we had 100,000 applications a year. If you can imagine, 90 to 100,000 a year, sometimes more. We couldn't even look at them all. And we had 52,000 employees before the merger with Sprint. And we wouldn't find everyone we needed. If you keep diversity in mind, you might not have that candidate you're looking for to complete your team in the application. So you always have to be recruiting in addition to hopefully getting a nice application flow, referrals, people that, hey, I have someone I would like to work with that I know, have your employees bring them in. But when I met with Cody Sanford, who at the time was the Senior Executive Technology at T-Mobile, CTO, he only did meetings at 6 a.m., which was a joy. So I went in and I said, Cody, what's up? He goes, well, I'm holding your team accountable. You're responsible for recruiting, and I can't get staffed. And I said, well, you have 12,000 people. Your team is 12,000 big. So between engineers and tech people at T-Mobile at the time, it's 12,000 of the 52,000 people. I said, I can't possibly keep up with that turnover because the applications aren't bringing in the people that you want. I said, and this is what we know about tech. And so this is statistically true, and I believe it still is. When you recruit someone in tech, it's different than when we recruited people even back in the day when you wanted to work for a big brand. Now, this is good news for you because you may not be a big brand yet. You will be, but you may not be. It may not be a brand they've heard of. But here's what tech people want. They want a challenging project. They want their resume full of challenging, awesome, new, cutting-edge projects. If it's Google, even all the better, but they'll leave Google for a great project. I've seen it up close because I was in Seattle for a long time. You can recruit from Amazon, Google, Microsoft very easily if you're bringing in tech because they want that cool project. And they want to know what you're about. If you're leading the tech in your company, whether you're the founder or the leader of tech, they want to know who you are and what you're leading and why it's important to you. And we found that to be true more for people in tech than any other discipline. Other disciplines were still attracted to a brand. They were interested in who the leader was and what the job was, but the jobs are generally the same. But project work is not. It's very different, especially with the advent of AI and any new technology. People in tech, the good ones, are scrambling to get their name on those projects first. So use that to your advantage. And then what I told Cody is that means you have to commit more of your time. He said, I put 0% of my time and I delegate it all. I said, that's fine. As Sheila just said, that's fine for the recruiting part and the hiring part. But where's the part where you support those people by being there? Whether it's doing a panel, meeting them at the conference, being part of their recruiting process, even virtually. And he looked at me and says, I have a very successful peer in this. And he told me he spends 50% of his time recruiting because he's made it that important. He goes, I'm using about 1% of my time. There's probably a bigger number in there for me. And guess what? He committed more of his time, not 50%. To your point, that's very difficult to do when you have so many other responsibilities, especially as a founder. But please never just divorce yourself completely from being involved, especially when people are going to consider who you are and why they want to be part of your success and follow your story and be part of your story. It's a big deal. You're all impressive people, clearly. I've met a lot of you already. Folks who are starting out, folks that are in tech, want to learn from you. And they don't know how to ask because they're tech people. They want to learn. They want to learn more, and they want to be funded to do cool things. So they got to know who you are. And as you said, they want to see you in your eyes. Not only your partners and your founders and your senior team, but they want to see you too because they want you to see them for who they are. And they want to bring their special skills.
So Sheila, you talked a little bit about ownership in the company for your employees as an additional incentive. Marty, you're talking about challenging projects when it comes to recruiting tech. What else are you guys seeing or doing to recruit candidates, kind of differentiate your company in this tough race for talent to get the best employees? Is it free lunch on Friday? Is it reimbursing for a gym membership? What are you seeing these days?
Yeah, so we do. We get together. I like parties and trips.
Who doesn't?
And I am also, I'm a touchy-feely. So I like to, make sure that I understand who you are. I get to know them by, really being close up and personal, right? Understanding who they are, their families. We, get together once a month. Everybody gets together for employee lunches. They get to pick a place. We're starting some trips. I love to travel, so they'll get to go a couple of really neat places this year. And since it's still a small enough group, we're able to do that. And again, it just continues to build that commitment and that trust between each other because we've got some hard work to do over the next 5 years.
There's not much I can add to that answer. I will tell you that culture, whatever your culture is, people come in, they may ask you, but they'll definitely ask people who work for you, why should I come to work here? And what most people say is, well, here's what fun we have, or here's why it's cool, and here's why it's challenging, and here's why I'm fulfilled. And then they fill that in with a story. And those trips, when you lay out a couple of your hard-earned dollars in your company to bring people together for a great conference in a fun place, so you can have business too, but you can let your hair down, you have a great time, a great meal, especially when you're small, it goes a long way because people feel valued because you're actually allowing them to be at work and have fun that's not related to the actual job they do, but rather to build that team. Team building, I'm a big proponent of just coming in and having some fun together. If you bring people together, always commit some part of that to getting to know each other better and doing some common experiences. And travel, food, that's what builds a culture. And then you tell your story. I want to be connected to you because of your story. Why did you start the business you're in? Again, look at the stories that are in here. Helping the community stay safe, that's pretty important. Always has been, but maybe never more than now. And you can go on and on with each of your stories. And a lot of it is your personal journey. I started from nothing. I didn't even start in the United States or whatever it might be, but here I am. I didn't have money for school. I couldn't go to school. Here's how I found my way. Or whatever it might be. And it might be, hey, I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth and went to Yale, Harvard, and MIT and said, what's next? But then what did you do with it? Because that doesn't mean anything to people who can't go, except what can you do for me? Because it sounds like you're someone I can learn from. And those are the cultural stories and the fun that people will tell on your behalf. Because that ends up being the culture of your company.
I would agree because getting together, you get those personal stories. And I'm transparent. So my staff get to know me up close and personal. There's not much of my story that I won't tell. So this company is my second company. I had another company, during the 2008 sort of craziness that I lost and, that we just went out of. And I tell people that story, how I, failed in society's eyes by losing a, $20 million business in 2008 because I didn't make the right decision soon enough. And I walked out of there $1 million in debt in bank loans. But it is those kinds of stories and being very open and honest and transparent about what I am really, really good at and those things that I have learned from that also builds this camaraderie. And it also builds trust and a safe place for our staff to be able to, say, Sheila, this one's a big one. I don't know if we can do this. And then we just have to all get together and kind of figure it out, right? So it's easier to do that with people that you're building this camaraderie and this relationship with.
You jumped the gun a little on my last question. That's okay. Maybe you'll have something else to add, or we'll go to Marty. But before we close it out for Q&A, the final question I was going to ask for the founders in the room that are going through scaling their team, looking to grow to where you guys have been. Final piece of advice, mistakes you've made along the way. What's been great about the panel is that we have two different points of view. We have Sheila, a little bit of the smaller business side, some of those challenges, and then Marty, more of the enterprise side. So it does give us, two different points of view, which has been great. So we'd love to hear. Marty, we'll start with you, and Sheila, if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, what's interesting is the commonality between enterprise and whether it's 52,000 employees at T-Mobile or 10,000 at Mod. It still comes down to capacity and capability. And you have to be really in tune with your CFO or your own wallet, as Sheila just said, on what you can afford. And do you have a plan that's good in good times and not so good times? Now, 2008 was particularly not so good times. So that was very difficult for everyone to navigate, including famously banks, most importantly. So very difficult time. And I'm sure that we'll have some bad weather in the future. However, one of the things that I really learned, and it was an easy mistake to make, is, there's no limit to who I can hire. Because the more I can hire, the more I can sell. It's always math. It's always math. And here's why. Because if you over-rotate and hire too many people and you hit a rough patch, you're going to have to let them go. And I've been on both sides of that table multiple times. It is hard to let someone go. It's even harder to lose your job because the company can't afford to keep you around. And there's no performance issues. And I can tell you from an HR standpoint, I'm sure Elise can too, you don't have a downsizing and get rid of all your bad performers. That's not how it works. Sometimes you got to cut through the bone, and it's really tough. So if you think of that level of pain when you're hiring and you're deciding how big a department's going to be, or if you need that next person or that first person, think about capacity and capability and the commitment you're making to that person, because they're bringing their career to you. Your company will be part of their resume for a very long time, forever. But no matter how old their resume gets, you'll always be part of their career. And what you don't want to do is lose people. Now, unfortunately, it can be unavoidable, but you can largely avoid it by being very smart and always being conservative. Enterprise or startup, it doesn't matter. But don't overtax yourself. Don't overtax yourself. Make sure that you're thinking about, what am I putting in? I just got a call, in fact, from someone, and they're having great success. The company's 10 years old, and for that 10 years, they've outsourced HR, which is very common. Highly recommended for a long time for little companies. And they got to the point where they went past the point they probably should have had a couple of people internally because their vendor can no longer keep up with them. Their compliance is fine, but there's so many more aspects they wanted. But you know what? That's a nice problem to have versus, we went ahead and hired a department of 62 people in HR, and we don't need them. Right? We could cut that back because there was a time we didn't have very many or any. And that's one example, and I pick on it because I know the department. But make sure that you're thinking about the future in terms of what you can afford. And I know you do, because a lot of times it's your money or money that you've gotten because of your name and your ability. So I know that you care about every single dollar and spend it like it's your own. So as you're hiring people, have them think of that owner mentality as they're thinking about it. And it's okay to get together and plan that. And the last thing I want to add is think about how people are performing. I'm sure Matt does it, but as you grow, take the time, I would recommend quarterly, but at least twice a year, to sit as a senior team and talk about every single person. Matt referenced A players, B hiring C players. That's actually a real strategy that started with GE in the 90s. And think about who is exceeding expectations and can do more, A, who is doing just fine, right? But we might be able to challenge and invest, that's a B. And a C, not so good. And if you can't hang on to C, you got to go. Because if you need to cut someone, you're going to go ahead and do it on your time and at a time where you can evaluate performance. I know that's a harsh message to end on, but when you think that way, you really think through the commitment you're making to someone you've taken the time to hire and whether or not you've been involved in that process or you've ordained the people to make it for you. you are making the commitment to that individual at whatever level you're hiring them, that you're committed to their success together with yours. And that starts to create some real magic because new employees will feel that in the hiring process. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the other thing, since we're so much smaller, our criteria is real, tight. It is profitability, and projections. And so we have a really tight formula that we use in terms of determining when we are ready to hire. So now, we're about to grow the team from 10 to 12, and those 2 hires are coming on very specifically because we've added 2 new clients to pilots. And so we are very, very strategic and methodical about how we do that growth. I, of course, would sit back and love to have 10 more people on board, but my staff is really good about saying, nope, 2, we can do it with 2, and we can do it with 2 for this amount of time. And then we think we have to, look back at the numbers. And, the other thing for us is I've been very intentional about financing my company. Right now, we're self-financed because we have enough pilot growth and enough clients where I can be very intentional about growing and strategic, so I'm doing it exactly the way I want to do it. Other people do want to grow just fast, just want to do it because you can, and because everyone else is doing it. And I get that too. People ask me, you've got some bandwidth, you've got these great projects, you've got these great clients, and I could probably grow fast, but I decided I don't want to. And again, I need partners that are on the journey with me and understand my strategic growth and are right there to help me strategically plan out how I decide, how I go about this journey. So that's just been our choice, and that's worked for us so far. So far, I haven't, out of the 10 people and the 2 that we're bringing on, I haven't had to let go of anyone. Everyone's been on board for 3 years or more, and I'm pretty happy with that so far. So hopefully I'll continue to have a good
Sure
role.
you will. And intentional growth is what I'm hearing. Intentional growth, strategic growth, not just growing to grow. So that's great. Let's give it up for our panelists, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Sebastian?
We'll start the Q&A. So.
First and foremost, thank you all for such an amazing panel. You did a wonderful job, provided a lot of insight, so I appreciate that. It's a very interesting time in that we're talking about growing your team in tech talent, but also we've seen some major layoffs from major companies as well. You talked about hiring from both the small business side as well as the enterprise side. And we're also in an era where everybody's excited about AI, ChatGPT, and all the things that are coming with that. So for those that are looking to be those new employees that you talked about creating that culture with, that are also nervous about the role of AI as far as job stability, what do you generally say to those employees? How do you provide them assurance in a space where you have to navigate both efficiency as an owner, but also managing your people?
I can jump in.
Yeah, you can. I haven't had any major issues with that yet. So
yeah, it's a great question because the prevalence of AI and the growth of AI and the introduction is coming at the same time these major brands are laying off, who, by the way, are all guilty of overhiring, not thinking about it, not having a strategic plan. By the way, Sheila's spoken like a true org developer who understands having a plan. By the way, even if you have one person in your company, you should have an org chart. And you should have more boxes that you're going to grow in and when you think you're going to grow in, right? That's organizational design. So let's talk about AI. And one of the challenges I've given myself in the last year, because I was part of a small startup that does NFTs, is to start learning Web3, blockchain, crypto, NFTs, and now AI. And so I spend a lot of my time just studying it. So AI is particularly interesting because everyone's having fun with ChatGPT, and now Google's launched their version. When you think about it, and if you talk to someone who really understands AI, and you talk to someone who understands AI and what jobs it can do without human interaction, it doesn't do anything more than a truck and a car did in the 1920s. It's helpful, but there are very few jobs it can do. And one of the best rules of thumb, and again, this isn't me, I wish I could cite where I learned it. If there's human interaction that's required at any level, ChatGPT or any AI is not going to get it done. It's simply not. Can it do some processes? Yeah, there's some legal processes it can do. There's some just mechanical processes. So there might be some entry-level jobs that it might make more efficient. And of course, people are saying, well, but it can write. If you've never asked it to write, it really can't. If you know how to write, it just makes you angry because it's really not that good. But it's fun. It's a cool, fun tool, and it will grow. And a lot of people are saying, put the brakes on, not only because they're worried about AI might grow into Terminator. That's not really what they're worried about, but that it will be misused. And that people will say, well, gosh, then I won't study writing, or marketing will be a thing of the past. Can you imagine? Marketing is a very human thing, or HR, or company leadership. Right? It doesn't do that, and it will never do that, at least not in our lifetimes, and that's what experts are saying. However, integrating AI into what we do might be a really good idea to understand what kind of a tool could it be to help you with that capacity and capability. So I don't want to speak like an expert on that, but I'm learning, and it's fascinating, but it's not going to replace a lot of jobs, especially in tech, leadership, the non-commodity jobs. And commodity jobs are wrench turners. AI is never going to flip a pizza. AI is never going to throw dough. AI is never going to turn a wrench on an aircraft carrier. It's just not going to happen. We're going to need people to interact with people and things. And AI will be another tool we'll look back on and go, yeah, when people are excited about that car, now everyone has cars, or many people have cars, or transportation, or flying, right? People used to dress up to fly. Now we all fly. We just jump on and hope it lands where we want it to, right? AI will be that. It will be that. And it's a cool thing. It's going to be a very cool thing. But so will crypto, NFTs, blockchain. It's stuff that people don't even understand, but we've moved on. Now it's AI. But there are entire countries that are starting to adopt crypto as their currency because it gives more people an opportunity. And I was speaking with someone earlier. I did study this. Kenya actually started with something called M-Pesa, which was a non-centralized banking system that treated everyone equally, including the remote farmer, with people in Nairobi. I wrote a big paper on it because this was before crypto that I knew about it, because it gave everyone an opportunity. And so a lot of the problems with more developed countries are that they have a central banking system that eliminates people from being part of it. If you've never felt that, then you have a lot of money. I bet everyone in this room has felt that here. So great question. I would tell you it's not an impact, but if people are spinning up about it for sure.
Great panel. Thank you. Quick question for you guys, especially Marty. You have been senior HR exec at Bond Pizza and before that T-Mobile. So what are 3 mistakes that people make when they're laying off people? I know you're talking about growing your team, but what are the 3 mistakes that people typically make?
I'm sure Sheila has a perspective on this. Like I said, I think she has a lot more org design experience than I do. I will tell you, having been a part of planning them, executing them, and then being executed with big organizations. First, look, money's important, right? So you're going to want to have a financial goal. That's probably what's driving your decision. It probably is. And it was led by a sales drop-off or a revenue drop-off or some other headwind that you're expecting in your business. So you know now you have to make this decision. So 1, not being sure it's the right thing to do. There are companies who do it just to raise their stock price. Oh, they're being responsible. They're laying off 10,000 people. Well, who said that's the right number? I'm telling you internally, be sure it's the right number. Not 1 more, not 1 less. And if it doesn't have to be 1, don't do it. Some board of directors members might not like that, but I'll tell you that's number 1. Number 2, plan, plan, plan. Everyone has to feel the pain. Don't put it in one department. Well, we don't need HR anymore. Cut training and leadership development. And you do that because you think they're less important than people who turn wrenches or serve customers. And they are. But they're important because of the front line, because of the customer. So when you take something away, like, again, I'm picking on HR, but it could be anything because it's less important, your front line's going to feel it. Well, wait a minute, I used to be able to call Elise, and she would answer my questions. Now, I've got a payroll question. Who do I talk? We don't have that person anymore. Well, now what do? We put this cool technology in place. Well, that's hard for me. And so now I'm unhappy. So the third thing is, when you plan and execute, like who knows first, in what order, what do you say, who's doing it, all the human capital part of it, to make it as positive an experience as possible. That's hard. And then thirdly, the change management portion. A lot of companies go, it's done, we're moving on, we're not talking about it, get back to work. That's not how you do change management. It is not. You have to have informal leaders, formal leaders, a message. You have to be there. You have to be accountable as the leader. You better show up. And those are the three things I see people step away and delegate. And the planning is not good enough, because I will tell you, and I watch this happen, it usually happens in a merger. And they tell you human capital is a synergy. So they let go of a whole bunch of people because they made a commitment on some plan. Watch what happens in the next 2 years when they hire everyone back. And it's almost never the people they fired, because they're gone and they're working for someone else now. So now they have to go through that whole recruiting thing again because they wanted to hit a number that wasn't necessary. So I don't know what you want to add.
Yeah, I think all of that is. I think all of that is correct. But when you're coming from a smaller perspective, compassion for me was the most important thing. And so, because I have been through, where I've had to lay off a number of 20, 30 people in the other company, what we did was we prepared them, and we prepared them in a way that as compassionately as we could. An example would be, I knew the numbers were declining. We knew we were going to have to do something within a 6-month period. And so I would talk to, and we knew we were going to do it in waves, and we would take the first group, and we would say, you're going from full-time to part-time to contract over this next 6-month period, with the, at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to attrition out. And at least we gave people a time and a way to acclimate and to get comfortable. No one gets real comfortable with it, but it was humanely done. Even when they went from full-time to contract, I kept their benefits going. And again, I was really open to them looking for other opportunities, because I knew I was letting them go, and they had a time frame to do it. Not only did they appreciate that, but some people found jobs in a month, and I still paid them out their package. Some people took 2 or 3 months, and they did it on their own time, and some people literally hung on till the end, right? But I think if you've got to think about it, and I think now there is no compassion in the way we're dealing with humans as commodity in the business now, especially in the tech world. And I don't care who you are. That is not how I'm built. That's just not how I run my organization, and that's not how I treat human beings. And so I think that would be the only other thing I'd add, is you got to be compassionate about how you do it.
I just want to celebrate you. Now, I just met you last night virtually and in person today, but you talked about stories and being transparent. That's someone I would want to work for. I can tell you, having been part of more reductions than I can remember, that's a level of compassion I've rarely seen. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever seen that level of compassion. If you can do that, that's the story people will tell. You know what? Even when we had to lay people off, this is what Sheila did. So congratulations. That is amazing. Seriously, that's a leader who cares about people, and that's a leader who can recruit people when needed. That's someone that attracts people.
Yeah, Matt talked about a kind of 30, 60, 90-day expectations when you're hiring people. Marty, you talked about having an org chart, even when it's just one. When you're at a team of 4, what other sort of documents or best practices would you recommend? And of course, asking for a friend.
You know, for us, we have morning huddles. We have 30-day, 60, 90-day plans. Everybody has to come to a bi-weekly meeting with what they're working on and how they're getting it done. And then we, you know, on a weekly staff meeting, we talk about what did you get accomplished, what are you having a problem with this week, and what do you need help on? So we sort of use tools that way that kind of help us stay connected. And it gives people a safe place to sort of say, yeah, I'm stuck on this one, right? And then the whole team can say, oh, well, you know, I used to do this, or I've got another tool, or after the team meeting, Jay, call me and I'll work through this with you. So we try to create safe places or safe spaces, for people to be able to have group accountability or community accountability.
I love what Matt and Sheila said about this. I'd add just a couple of things from a different perspective that I think complement what they said. One is the idea of having a 30, 60, 90 even before you post the job is a great idea because that's your perspective. Don't forget to get theirs. And I don't mean to sound critical of what Matt said because it's a great idea. Most companies don't do that, so it's a huge step forward, and I celebrate that. Take the time to say, I want to review this with you, but tell me what you think. I remember sitting down with a boss. I worked for Kinko's, if everyone remembers that company a long time. It's part of FedEx now. I sat with a boss named John Cannon. I loved him to death. But his onboarding, when I started working for him, he was a VP of the company, 2 pages, single space, typewritten of his expectations. And I shut up and listened. I felt like I was back in the Army. I'm like, yes, sir, got it. And he said, you can do anything you want, just don't break any of these rules. Got it. And I loved it. And I got to know John, and it got relaxed, but that was a tough first meeting. So that, to me, is my history, my experience with 30, 60, 90-day plans. The second thing is something that we took out of page at T-Mobile. We did something crazy radical and spoke at tons of conferences about it, but I'll tell you now. We got rid of annual performance appraisals. We got rid of that level of documentation. And I won't go into the whole plan, but I will tell you, because it should intrigue you. Don't start putting a bunch of paper between leaders and people, between supervisor and subordinate, whatever you want to call them. Because that becomes so formal that the subordinate will always feel like they're being talked at and being documented. No one wants to get written up, right? No, don't write people up. In fact, what I would tell you, if you want me to answer your question directly about what document, every conversation we have, why don't you just summarize what you heard? Let me know what you agreed to. What did you hear that we just talked about for 30 minutes? And meet on a regular basis. And I mean like every week. So guess what happens with all those emails? You did your annual performance appraisal with 52 documents. You don't need another one. So when you sit down and say, gosh, you're not going to get a raise. Your performance hasn't been good. It shouldn't be a surprise. Or we're giving you the biggest raise we can because, oh my gosh, look at what you accomplished. Or even better, we're going to develop you. We're going to invest more. And here, congratulations, you're now going to take this role and make more money. That's what people want. That's why people come to work. Well, that's not true. Some people just come to work to support what's important in their lives. They have something more important than you, believe it or not. But from a documentation standpoint, my advice is don't go overboard because people feel like they're not a part of it, and they'll wonder when they're going to be invited because they might be bringing some wonderful ideas and say, well, if I was building this 90-day plan, I would definitely get this done for you, right? So that's why so remember, I was in sales for 30 years, so I wouldn't give quotas. Oh, I had a quota for you, but I'd always start with, what do you think you're going to sell today? Because it was always a good number. And if it was higher than my number, it became the number, right? So why wouldn't you start with, what do you think you're going to do the next 90 days? You got an answer. You got a quota for them. I love that Matt said it. But make them a part of the process and say, do me a favor. Here's a document I have prepared for you, but I'd like you to add what your point of view was. Just send me an email by the end of the day. And then respond. I love this. Thank you. Because now it's not so scary that you're having what I call, and I learned this from a guy named Pancho Hall, was my supervisor. He calls them one-with-ones. Those of you who've ever played sports know what one-on-one is. That's a competition. Don't call it a one-on-one. It's a one-with-one. Sit down and be a consultant, be a coach, be an advisor, and be a boss or a supervisor and a person that they would pay to hear coach them. Think about it. If that's your level, if that's your standard when you meet with an employee, they're going to love meeting with you. They're not going to say, oh, no, I'm in trouble. Oh, my God, why am I going to Sheila's office? No, Sheila, are you kidding me? Sheila cares about people. Do you know what she did when she had to lay some people off? No, you want to run to her office. And that's the person that you are. That's the person you want to be, and business gets in the way. Don't let it get in the way, because you're busy. You're busy. And people are the most important thing you have. I don't care what your idea is. One of the things Matt said I loved, and really Sheila said this in her answer previously, is it doesn't matter what your idea and product is. It's the people that you bring around you, the people you bring to get it done, because you'll figure it out. Because all of us are smarter than each of us, and that includes you. And I know it's hard to hear, but it also includes me. So I never think I'm the smartest person in the room, because I'm not, because all of us are smart. Imagine if this group decided to go do something, it would get done. I guarantee it, because it's TiE Atlanta.
Awesome. Well, let's give it a round of applause to the panel. Cool. We really appreciate you guys coming. We're going to do post-event networking. So thank you again, and have a great night. Awesome.